So today I'm going to be talking to you about the best video recording settings you can use on your Nikon Z series camera. This is going to cover Nikon Z6, Z6ii, Z7, Z7 II, and the Nikon Z9 II as well as a few other cameras. So these settings are all fairly straightforward on the Z series cameras. So let's get into it and see what it's all about. So this is my video rig. Now you do not need something as complex as this. Now, absolutely awesome if you have something like it, but if not, you can just start off with your bare bones camera and kit lens, and I'm going to tell you how you can improve your video recording quality dramatically with these 12 tips and a few little bonus tips too as well thrown in. So tip number 1 is about recording resolution and video frame rate. So for me, you should always be recording in 4K resolution because this is the best resolution you're going to get out of these cameras. And you can always downscale the image afterwards if you want to save space. You can do that in editing software and whatnot. So the most important button on your camera when you're shooting video is this fella, the I button. Once you press that, the I menu appears on the screen and you can vary a whole multitude of settings. So that's going to give you a fantastic shortcut. There's no need to go into the menu and try and figure out what setting is where. So that button is incredibly important. So that's where you get it. Just press the I button. So let's say we want to change our resolution settings now. So what I do is press the I button to bring up the short menu, and we can press the left side of the pad to move the yellow box over onto our resolution settings and press OK then to select it. Or what I can do is I can just select the different options here by touching the screen. So because I'm shooting in Europe, I want to shoot at 21,600, which is 4K resolution, and it's at 25 frames per second. So if you want to shoot at 4K in the United States, you would select 21,600 at 30 frames per second. Movie quality mode, you have the option of high or you have the option of normal there then too as well. And to exit that, you just press the I button and I button again. And you can see up on top here we're at 21,600 at 25 frames per second. So 4K resolution for me is an absolute certain, something you should be using. So the next thing is video frame rate. Now this is slightly more complex because it depends on where in the world you're living. So let's say if you're living in the United States, you should be recording at 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second. I'll get into the reason why in a second. But if you're living in Europe, you should be recording at 25 frames per second or 50 frames per second. Now, the reason for this is it has to do with the mains frequency that you're working in your locality. So in the UK and in Europe, we're working on 50 Hertz. My mains frequency or refresh rate is at 50 Hertz per second, and I'm recording at 30 frames per second. You're going to get sort of flashing and strobing in the picture itself. So you want to avoid that at all costs. So the only way of doing that is by a recording of multiples of 50 Hertz. So 25 Hertz, 50 or 25 frames per second or 50 frames per second will solve that issue. And it goes the same in the States. You want to record at multiples of 60 Hertz. So in other words, 30 frames per second or 60 frames per second is going to get rid of that issue or that problem for you. Tip number 2 is about the 180-degree shutter angle rule. So what this basically means is that your shutter speed should be twice your frame rate. So it gives you this far more sort of a cinematic feel to your videos. So double your frame rate is your shutter speed. So in Europe, you'd be shooting at 1/50. So 1/50th of a second is your ideal shutter speed here. If you're in USA, your ideal shutter speed is 1/60th of a second when you're recording on 30 frames per second. That's incredibly important, and that is going to make a huge difference to your videos going forward. So if I want to change my shutter speed, you can see it's at 1/50th of a second. So if I roll this dial here, I can adjust my shutter speed up for a faster shutter speed, and I can adjust it back down a lot. 1/50th of a second is what I want at f3.5. Again, I can go down lower again. And that's basically it. So just turning this command dial when you're in the manual mode, and that's going to give you your shutter control there. Honestly, that now is going to make an absolutely massive difference. It's going to make it far more cinematic. It's going to make it smoother. It's just going to look right. So highly recommend you do that. And that really is one of the top tips. So tip number 3 is recording in 4K resolution, but it's making sure that your memory card is fast enough to be able to handle that. You're going to be recording a lot of data onto your memory card continuously. It's not like taking a photograph where you're going to be transferring over 10 photographs in a burst in 1 second. You're going to be recording continuously. So you need a card that's going to be strong enough, it's going to be fast enough, and it's going to be good enough quality that it's not going to fail on you or go corrupt. So a good quality memory card that's capable of handling 4K recordings with a high enough data transfer rate. And the next thing is, you do not need a massive memory card. 64 gigabytes is generally more than enough, especially if you're doing talking head videos, something like this. What I'd suggest is having multiple 64 gigabyte memory cards, high data transfer rate memory cards, rather than one 256 gig. Because if that one 256 gig goes corrupt, you have an awful lot of video gone. At least if it's across multiple cards, you're a lot safer. You can say, right, card failed, card went wallop, we can restart and we can shoot that scene again and go from there. So multiple memory cards that are fast enough for the high data transfer rate of 4K is going to be an absolute godsend to you. So how do we format our memory card? What we do is press our menu button and then we move down to the spanner icon and we go over here to format memory card, press OK, and then it's going to ask you which card you want to format. Do you want to format the XQD card or the CF Express card or the SD card slot? I've only one card in, so I'm going to click on OK on that. It's warning me then I'm going to delete it, so I just press OK again. Formatting memory card, and we're done. Bonus tip number 1, because this really hasn't got a lot to do with the video recording quality in your camera, but it's got to do with what you're going to do with it afterwards. It's free video editing software. And yes, you heard that right. This is completely free. It's video editing software I use myself personally and I've used for years now. It's DaVinci Resolve. DaVinci Resolve can be downloaded completely free. Yes, there is a paid studio version, but being honest with you, what's in the standard basic version is amazing. It'll do everything for you. All my YouTube videos, I've used DaVinci Resolve in every single one of them. Editing speed, effects, amazing. Top class, really being honest with you. So if you want something free, DaVinci Resolve, I'm going to leave a link in the blog down below. I've no connection with DaVinci, just in case anyone is wondering, or with Blackmagic. So yeah, definitely do try that. That is definitely going to be worth it for you. Tip number 4, we're going back to camera settings now again. This has to do with how you're going to capture as much data as possible in the recording in your camera. Now, the first thing is the movie quality mode should be set to high. The second thing is, ideally, you'd be recording in a flat profile on your camera. So if you're recording directly on a memory card in your camera, use a flat profile. The reason for that is that it's going to give you more dynamic range in your images. So how do we set our picture profile? Quite simply, you just press the I button. Once you press that, and over here on the side, then we have picture profile. So I can just click on that. And we have A, SD, NL, VI. We have a whole lot of options. We can run all the way through, but wait there now a second. FL is the one we want. So FL is flat, and I just press OK. And now that's set as flat. And that's it, we're done. That's how you set the picture profile. So let's say you're out shooting some property video. So you have a house that's going up for sale, you want to shoot a video internally. If you record in a flat profile, it's going to give you more dynamic range. So it's going to give you more of a difference between your highlights and your shadow details that you can recover afterwards in post-production. If you record in any of the other settings, it's not going to work as well. You're not going to get quite as much dynamic range that you can pull back afterwards. Now, obviously, the better option here is to shoot an N-Log, which would be HDMI out up to an Atomos Ninja 5 and recording directly onto that then. So that's going to give you 10-bit N-Log video recording, whereas internally you're only recording on 8-bit. So you are losing quite a bit of detail there. And as I say, that's a log profile too as well. So the dynamic range is going to be far better on that. And it is going to give you, I suppose it's going to give you a lot more flexibility in post-production. Again, if you're shooting in the flat mode, you're going to have to edit your video afterwards. But that's very straightforward in DaVinci Resolve. But it is definitely worth it. Now, I should also mention you also have the option in this camera that you can record at ProRes RAW if you get the upgrade and record it onto the Atomos Ninja 5. So that is obviously going to be a lot better. Focusing modes is the next one. So what focus mode should you use? There's 3 different focusing modes. Well, there's actually 4 really as such. On this camera, you have AFS, you have AFC, you have AFF, and you have manual. Now, AFF is really good for video. That's the one I highly recommend you use. AFS and AFC, no. AFF, so it's sort of a follow focus system. Again, for setting AFF, you press our I button, and down below here in the bottom corner, we have the AFF option. It's on there now at the moment, but if I click on that, sorry, no, a second. So it's going to be full-time autofocus. It's AFS, AFC, AFF, which I like to call follow focus. I know it just makes it easier in my own head. Or we've manual focus. So manual focus, AFF or full-time AF, AFC or AFS. So AFF and press OK, and that's it, and we're done. The Nikon cameras were never great for video all along, I have to admit. But since they started bringing out the AFF system, and since the start of the Z6 onwards, that the focusing system has improved dramatically. So I highly recommend you use AFF for any of your videos going forward. You also too as well, of course, have the option of shooting manual. If you're shooting manual, that's where you can get a small bit more creative, and you can use follow focus systems and whatnot, where you can actually turn the dial here, and that in turn then is going to change the focus. You can set your hard stop points, so you can set it so it's going to focus on one person and one product and pull back to the next. So you can do all these things. It's give you far more creative control, I suppose. But again, I'm going to leave a link to a lot of these products in the description down below, where I have reviews and a few demo videos and whatnot, so you can see how they work, how it all goes together. And actually, as I think of it, I have a complete video too as well, and how I built my rig. It's slightly different to this one. I'm going to leave that in the description down below too as well. Focus tracking modes, because yes, we're still on focus. Focus tracking modes. What focus tracking mode should you use? The two I generally use would be face detection. So it's full frame, face detection, works really, really well, especially if you're doing something like a talking head video here, where I want to say, look, here I am sitting here, I'm moving backwards and forwards, the camera is focusing on my face as I go backwards and forwards. It's not on a spot mode or in manual, it's actually actively tracking me backwards and forwards. Then if I shove something like a camera up in front, it's going to focus on the camera. Then when I pull it back down along again, it's going to go back and it's going to focus on me. So it really is incredibly handy. If I put my hand out in front, it's going to focus on my hand, then pull my hand away, it's going to focus back on me again. So the face detection works really, really well, and I must admit, I'm incredibly happy with this camera. So selecting our focus tracking mode, we just press the I button again. We, above AFF, we select that, and here we have our different focus tracking modes. So there's full frame people, there is full frame animals. We go back here to auto area AF, we have spot or single point. There's a whole lot of options here, but auto area AF is the one I'm really liking. So click on that, and that's it, we're done. The other focus tracking system I would use is spot focus. So what you can do is you can select a spot on the screen, and if I grab, I'm going to grab a glass here now. So I have my glass here, and if I say, right, what I want to do is I want to shoot just a small B-roll, a small bit of B-roll. For that, I'm going to pop my camera down, I'm going to focus on it, spot in the center, and move that around, and I can go backwards and forwards, go up and go down, and once I leave the spot on the actual product itself, it's going to continue to track that, and it's going to continue to focus on that particular spot. So the other really cool thing with the full frame face detection is that you can actually, let's say if you have 3 or 4 people, we'll say you're out at a wedding, the ceremony is over, everyone is nice and relaxed, they're outside the church or outside the civil reception area, and they're all chatting away and they're all having a good time, and you have, let's say you have the groom, you have the best man, you have a bridesmaid, the mother-in-law, and you have the bride there, and they're all kind of chatting. You can actually individually go around and click on the screen and touch individual faces, and the camera will focus track on those faces. And then you can say to yourself, oh no, actually, let's say the groom is talking and he's telling everyone a joke or whatever else, or a funny moment that happened the morning of the wedding or something, and he's chatting away, you're recording this, and next thing he finishes, delivers his punchline, and the bride starts roaring, laughing, throws her head back, is having a great time. You can just simply just spin around, boom, click on the bride's face, and it's going to focus on her then again. And then for dramatic effect, you can pull back and look at the mother-in-law if she's kind of going, Jesus, what did he just say? Or go back to the groom or the best man. So you can quite simply just click from face to face to face. And that is incredibly handy. It's a really useful little feature, and it's something that I really like about this camera. Bonus tip number 2, and this is something that's going to spark savage debate, but I'm urging you to try it. This is a full frame camera, let's say, right? So if you're out shooting on a 35mm lens, okay, you're getting a specific look and you say, oh, do you know what I want to be able to do is zoom in just that small bit more, but I don't have another lens with me, or I don't want to change the lens, or I don't have a lens with long enough reach. What you can actually do is you can go into the DX mode, right? And what it's going to do is it's going to give you a 1.5 crop factor. So all of a sudden your 35mm lens is going to be multiplied by 1.5, which is going to be giving you more or less the equivalent of a 50mm lens. So on a full frame camera. So that's going to narrow in your angle. So it means you're going to be able to record more. So you're going to have a further reach, and you can actually get rid of more of the background if you wanted it. I'm getting a bit complex here now, but it's a really handy thing to know that by recording in DX mode, you're not going to be using the full sensor width for your 4K recording, but trust me, I've tried this. There is very, very, very little difference between recording in 4K in a full frame sensor and recording in 4K in the DX mode. I've tried the two recordings, put the two of them side by side and said, right, there is a slight difference there, right? In fairness, there is a very slight difference there. But if you wanted to do that afterwards in post, zoom in and crop your image in post-production, I guarantee you that's going to be worse. So I've tried this in numerous videos and I've seen an absolutely massive difference in the two. So do try that one. So changing from FX to DX. Firstly, you can see the FX logo is above here, so we know we're in our FX mode. So again, I press the I button and down here is the FX. So I can click on FX or DX and press my OK button, sorry. Press my OK button and that's it, and we're now in DX mode. So now we're cropped by 1.5. And to change back, just press I and click on the area again and click on FX and click on OK. And we're now back to FX. So it's really fast, it's really simple and incredibly handy. The next tip I have for you is to try and always shoot with Z-mount lenses. The Z-mount lenses are far superior to the older F-mount lenses when it comes to helping you with focus tracking. The focus tracking is just so much faster and so much more precise on the Z-mount lenses. Tip number 8 is your aperture. Now your aperture is what's going to tell the story in your video clip. Obviously enough, if you shoot at f4 or something, or f5.6, that's going to give you a certain depth of field. A certain amount of your image is in focus. Let's say right now I'm shooting at f3.5 because I have a camera in front of me which I want to be slightly in focus. I'm not really too worried about the background. When I get all that stuff just fractionally blurred out along. So what I can do is, if I shot this in f11, everything would be in focus and there's too much information being thrown at you. There isn't enough separation between me and the background. You don't know where to look. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to guide the person. This is what you want to be looking at. Here's the camera, here's me. Now the camera isn't perfectly in focus, but it's good enough. So if I shot this at f5, it would be better again, but then it's pulling the background more into it. So what you want to do is you want to decide, right, what do I want to show? What do I not want to show? So if you say to yourself, right, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start off at f4. Let's say you're shooting with the 24-70 f4 kit lens. You can start off at f4. You can go to f5.6. That's going to give you a sharp enough image. It's going to give you really good results, and it is going to help, especially when you're shooting up around 70mm, it's going to help blur out your background a small little bit. So how do we change our aperture? So again, it's the thumb wheel here, just directly underneath the shutter button and the power on and off button. So as I turn the front wheel, it is now adjusting my aperture up and down. And the one little tip I tell everyone here is, if you think of your aperture, right, which is your f-stop, think of F standing for focus. So the bigger the F number between f5.6 and f8, think of that as more F, so more focus. So f5.6 has less focus than f8. So if you want to blur out that background a small bit more, I could shoot this at f2.2 here now, and it's going to really, really help. But my depth of field is going to be very narrow, so my camera then, which is just in front of me, isn't going to be as in focus. So it's a reason why I picked f3.5 today. I normally shoot at f2.2, as I was saying, so I'm shooting at f3.5 just to help that. If I pop the camera alongside me here, it's perfectly in focus. If I bring it over here, it's not as in focus, and if I move it further back, it's not as in focus too as well. So it's about trying to get across the story you want people to see. So that's your aperture. So ideally speaking, I would start off around f5.6, because if your camera is hunting, let's say even if I start moving around the place here, there's enough depth of field that I shouldn't go out of focus. Whereas if I shoot with a very shallow depth of field, if I shot this at f1.4 now, let's say, the depth of field is going to be so shallow. If I move back here, and if the camera just doesn't catch me in time, I'm going to go blurred. Whereas now, there should be enough depth of field that when I'm moving around the place, you shouldn't really see you shouldn't see me going out of focus, I suppose. Tip number 9 is about ISO settings. Now, what ISO settings should you use? Ideally, that's going to be the thing that's going to be based on the scene, the amount of light that's available to you and whatnot. But one of the things I use here is I use auto ISO, but I've also enabled my maximum auto ISO at ISO 10,000. So I'm going to show you how to do that now. So how do we set our maximum ISO? Well, it's really quite simple. All we need to do is move down here to the movie shooting menu, go over, and then we have our ISO sensitivity settings. Once I click on that, it's going to give us the option of maximum sensitivity. So if I click on that again, we can go ISO 12,800, ISO 10,000, ISO 8,000. So if I select ISO 10,000, that is now the maximum ISO. No matter what I'm doing, I know my ISO isn't going to go too high, so my picture quality should be good enough. If I'm really shooting a fairly high-end video for someone, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop my ISO even down lower than that again, depending on what they want it for and the amount of post-production that's needed and whatnot afterwards. So it is incredibly handy having the auto ISO facility and being able to set your maximum ISO level. Tip number 10 is using electronic image stabilization. You have a thing called IBIS, which is in-body image stabilization, which is inside the camera. And what it's going to do is it's going to take minor camera shake out of the footage. So it's going to give you smoother footage by taking that little jerkiness. Let's say if you're holding your camera out and about and your hand is shaking a small little bit, it's going to be amplified by the fact that you're probably using a longer lens. So it's going to show up a bit more in your footage. So when you go back and look at it, or people are watching it, they nearly get seasick. It's moving around the place so much. So in-body image stabilization is going to help you a massive amount. I'm going to show you how to switch it on there now, but before I do, the other thing I should mention is that you also have the option of the stabilization in your lens too as well itself. And one of the things I found is if you're shooting with a lens that has the stabilization in it, or a gyro sensor built in, that its sport mode isn't the best. Its normal is generally the one I would go for. So yeah, let's have a look how you switch it on. So how do we switch on IBIS? We press the I button here again, that beautiful I button, and we go here to this fella. And we can just switch it on. And that's it, we're done. We also have the option just down below it too as well. That's electronic VR. And down below it, we have vibration reduction then. So I can switch that on too as well. And we have the option of on, or we have the option of sport. So it's normal is the one I prefer. So I leave it on normal and that's it. We're done. And the other thing I should mention too as well is the next best bet above this is going for a gimbal. A gimbal is going to give you completely smooth, fluid movements once you have the gimbal set up properly. But a real serious word of warning is try not to use IBIS with a gimbal because the two of them can fight sometimes. And especially if you're panning left or right, it's going to give you that really kind of a jerky movement. So a gimbal is the better option, but IBIS is absolutely brilliant too as well. So yeah, let's have a look to see how you switch it on. So how do we switch on IBIS? We press the I button here again, that beautiful I button, and we go here to this fella. And we can just switch it on. And that's it, we're done. We also have the option just down below it too as well. That's electronic VR. And down below it, we have vibration reduction then. So I can switch that on too as well. And we have the option of on, or we have the option of sport. So it's normal is the one I prefer. So I leave it on normal and that's it. We're done. So bonus tip for you. If you're a vlogger and if you love being able to just handhold your camera out long and talk away to the camera and see yourself while you're talking, you can't obviously do that on the Z6, Z6ii, the Z7 and the Z7 II because it doesn't have a flip out screen, so you can't see yourself. Now, if you really want that security to say, yes, I'm definitely in frame, I'm definitely in focus, I can see what's going on. What you can do is you can get a mobile phone mount for the cold shoe, or the hot shoe, I should say, and you can mount it on the hot shoe, and then you can put on SnapBridge, and you can actually see what the camera is seeing. So you can actually see yourself. So that is going to give you your flip out screen. And it's also going to be bigger than the screen that's supplied with the camera. Cool, isn't it? Tip number 11 is start using ND filters. No, hey Kieran, Jesus, what are ND filters? ND filters are neutral density filters, and basically as such, they're just sunglasses for your camera. You can buy a variable ND filter, and that will adjust the brightness of that will adjust depending, that's probably filthy dirty now, it's in front of it, but the brightness of that will adjust depending on the angle you turn these two polarizing filters at. Because most variable ND filters, or all variable ND filters, are two polarizing filters. So when you turn them one way, it'll let more light in. You turn it the other way, and it'll let less light in. So you can use that. You're out shooting on the fly, you've it on the front of your lens, and you can turn this variable ND filter to let more light in or to block more light. So a variable ND filter or an ND filter, and using something like a matte box, is going to make a huge difference. So what that's going to do for you is, as we mentioned before about frame rates, let's say we're shooting at 25 frames per second, we're out on the beach, beautiful scene, couple walking along, and you're recording it for posterity's sake. It's your kids, or you know, it's a paid shoot you're on, and you're thinking, oh my god, I want to catch this really smoothly, really nice cinematic effect, shallow depth of field, because it's the couple you want to show, and just leading off the distance, the background is slightly blurred out, a bit like I'm shooting here now. You might want to shoot it at f2.8 or something, let's say, for example. It's a bright day, you're shooting at f2.8, your ISO is at ISO 100, and you're going, it's too bright, you know? Because your shutter speed is, let's say, 1/50th of a second, because you're recording at 25 frames per second. So it's too bright. What are you going to do? Well, what a lot of people end up doing is increasing your shutter speed. And once you increase your shutter speed, you're not going to get that lovely, smooth cinematic effect. So what you can do to get the correct exposure at those light levels, pop on an ND filter. So pop in an ND filter, it's going to reduce down the light level, and you can use the correct shutter speed with the correct aperture at the right ISO, and you get exactly the scene you're looking for. So again, I've reviews and descriptions on all these items in the description down below, so you can actually see separate videos about ND filters, and you can see separate videos on the matte box too as well itself, describing how that works too as well. So do feel free to check those out. Everyone wants really light gear now. But the thing with light gear is you get all these little micro movements. It's very easy just, you know, with your hand holding out long to move it like that, and your hands are shaking slightly. If you're holding something fairly heavy, it's going to be far steadier. So it might seem kind of mad to build up a heavy rig, but having a slightly or heavy rig is going to get rid of all those little micro jitters and whatnot in your video footage, and it's going to help to make it a small bit more smooth. Because your muscles are working a small bit harder, you will help to keep it just that bit steadier. You don't need all this fancy gear, but you need to know what this fancy gear does, so you can actually use things like this going forward creatively and solve those problems yourself. So variable ND filter, left side handle, knowing your settings, looking at your aperture and thinking, oh my god, what story do I want to tell in this image? Making sure your ISO settings are all right, leaving an ISO auto in, that's going to take control of that. Adjusting your frame rate, and these are things you don't then have to change. Actually, before you go, I have a playlist on the Nikon Z series cameras, so if you want to check that out, I have a few tips, tricks about ISO, what's the best ISO setting to use on your camera, and things like shooting with extended shutter modes and whatnot, and camera rig videos and whatnot. So do check that out. I'm going to leave a link here. So thanks again for watching, everyone, and see you out there.